Good afternoon. Welcome to the City of Murfreesboro Planning Commission meeting for July 20th, 2020. We'll call our meeting to order, and we do have a quorum present today. Everybody's here. Welcome. All right. It's vacation time. It's not used to that. First item of business is our consent agenda. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review those. If there's any of those you would like removed for further discussion, please let us know. And if not, we'll be ready for a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Under GDO today we have two items. We have the first one is North Church LLC Lot 2. It's Holiday Inn Express. Final design and site plan review of a 60,000 square foot hotel located on 3.3 acres, zoned MU and GDO 1, located along Medical Center Parkway and Robert Rose Drive. Pradeep Agnorti, I cannot ever say it and I apologize, but Ms. Green, take it for me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hrt has an application before you to consider final design review and site plan approval. And this item was considered at your last meeting for initial design review. You reviewed the architecture and gave some initial feedback. Although the feedback relating to wayfinding signage, oh good, they moved it to mine. Great, was directed toward another project. We left the meeting and asked Mr. Hrt to look at signage for this project, and so they are proposing to put the Holiday Inn Express sign on Medical Center Parkway, and so that helps with the shared accesses. And so even though I know your comments were directed toward a different project, we thought they were rightly applied here. They could choose to put a sign on Med Center or Robert Rose. In this case, because the building is oriented toward Med Center, the sign will go on Medical Center Parkway, and they've worked with our building codes department to make sure they're in compliance with that. The site plan, of course, is for a hotel. The hotel will have enough parking to support our minimum parking standards. There's also a pad that's between the proposed structure, the four-story structure, and Robert Rose Drive is kind of an almost maybe a trapezoid parallelogram, I don't know, like a rectangle, and the gateway requires for that to be, of course, well kept in the meantime. And one of the questions at initial design review was, is there enough parking for proposed use there and for the hotel? And based on general retail or office, there's enough parking for that. The pad would not have enough parking for a restaurant unless the Planning Commission were going to entertain some kind of shared parking agreement. And we've shared that with Mr. Hrt. He's aware of that, and I believe they don't believe that this will sit as an empty pad for very long. As a matter of fact, he's called me and tossed some ideas out and is looking for somebody to construct that site, so we don't expect it to sit. But in any case, we do have some conditions that can make sure it's a well-kept site. The material board is here, of course, and the architect is here. If you have any questions regarding that, I know they went through that before. This site does have a pool along the north property line, and that's serving as their formal open space, which is something very common with hotels. They will create, sometimes called a resort-style pool, where they have shade structures, and they have decorative pavement, extra landscaping, fire pits, and those sorts of things. And so you can see on the north side of the building, which is adjacent to the stormwater facility to the north, is the formal open space. If you have any questions about that, of course, I'm glad to answer those as well. The plan is in good order. Staff would ask, though, that if you approve it today, that you do it subject to all staff comments. Other than that, representatives are here this afternoon of the application, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. The owner's represented, the architect's represented, and so is the engineer.
Okay. What questions, comments from the Planning Commission? Or would you like to hear from any of the representatives here on the project?
If there's no questions or comments, I'll make a motion. We approve subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Our next item is the Murfreesboro Gateway Mark Purdle Subdivision Lot 1. This is the Hrt Stonegate Center. This is initial design review of a 744-square-foot porte-cochere addition to an existing building on 4.6 acres, zoned MU and GDO 3, located at 1639 Medical Center Parkway. Hrt of Tennessee, LLC is the developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you again. This next item is for property, a lot that's located south of Medical Center Parkway, northeast of Hrt Drive, and north of Gateway Boulevard. This property currently has a multi-story office building on it. Some of us who've been here a while call it Purdle Building or Mark Purdle Building because it was designed and constructed by Mr. Purdle. The property did transfer ownership early this year, so Mr. Purdle no longer owns it. So, but the name of the subdivision is Mark Purdle Subdivision Lot 1, so I guess we're not easily rid of him. But so the new owners would like to convert most of the uses here to medical offices. It may surprise you that there are some medical and there's some general office in this building, and the HRT, which is a company, an LLC that I'm not familiar with, but their design engineers reached out to me to discuss the property, and they would like to convert it to mostly medical uses. And they acquired the adjacent vacant parcel as well. The parking for medical offices is slightly higher than just general office. Real estate offices and medical offices have a little bit more of a parking demand. And so we, of course, shared with the new owners about the design process and expectations for development here, the investment the city's made, and how we'd like to see it. So they're not looking, of course, to put just a parking lot on the adjacent lot. In the future, they'll probably come back and want to have another building and parking. The plans that we reviewed before, we've been anticipating a building on the vacant lot, but they're not there yet. Where they are, though, is at a point where they'd really like to have a covered entrance for the people visiting the space. So the porte-cochere addition is just for that, the covered entrance. The building is oriented toward Hrt Drive, so if you see the ortho, you can see a concrete sidewalk going straight to that entrance, and that's where the proposed porte-cochere or covered entrance is. Now that covered entrance is cantilevered, so there are only 2 columns next to the building. It projects over the drive aisle at a height that exceeds our minimum height requirements so that a fire truck or a large vehicle can get under the porte-cochere. But there are no columns in the drive aisle side, so it's cantilevered over the drive aisle. I think one of the reasons I'm spending some time sharing that with you, and here's the material boards for you all. They are using the same buildings, the same materials. Get away. Yeah, it happens to the best of us. The 2 steel columns supporting the structure are wrapped with calcium silicate veneer up to 9 feet 4 inches and capped with stone, and it transitions to just a little bit of metal, so you don't really see any exposed steel, which I know is something we look for. And then early on, I noticed that the porte-cochere slightly slants upward, and I thought that was odd. And then I told them that it was a concern and that I would share that concern with Planning Commission. That it just seemed unusual. I was about seeing the underside of it, the fact that it slants forward, and then the possible light intrusion. They have since done some research, and apparently there's some that look like this in the gateway, and so they've included some photos of existing awnings that slightly slant upward, and they assure me that it's not as bad as I originally thought. I wanted to present it to you. Of course, they're here today representing the applicants, and we can go through some of those pictures that they've given. They called it, of course, canopy precedents. And what you have on the screen now is a rendering of daytime, nighttime rendering of the proposed canopy. They've assured me that there will be no glare from the curve upward, that you will not be able to see the light fixture. Generally, if you can see the actual bulb itself, it's a problem. And with this one, the design has been tweaked so that you cannot see the bulbs. Here's some images they've taken to prove me wrong. There's a couple more. And I suspect maybe the other facilities just didn't highlight it like these applicants did. So I told them that I would present both sides, the fact that I shared with them I was concerned with it initially, and then the images that they took of other buildings. And so This is coming to you for initial design review, and they'd like your feedback on the architecture regarding the porte-cochere addition to this building.
So my guess is part of the reason for the upward tilt might be from a drainage perspective.
They have a response, and I copied it in here, and it'll come up and speak to it. That is one of the reasons,
Okay.
but there are multiples.
Questions?
If you'll say your name and the company.
Yes, David Magner. I'm an architect with Gresham Smith. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So yes, to answer your question, it's twofold. One is because if it's an existing building, the height of the backside or the part of the canopy that interacts with the building has a certain limit. We didn't want to affect the windows, and we didn't want to reduce the height, but we still wanted to tie in to have a waterproof connection. At the same time, we wanted to clear the drive aisle for fire and ambulance emergency vehicles, which we're meeting with now anyway for a project across the street. So it really had a functional need first. It's purely not aesthetical. And it does help us to pitch the water back and collect it to the sides. That way we're not dumping it on people as they walk into the building.
Okay, any questions? Thinking maybe it doesn't look as pronounced. Maybe in real life, we're looking at the exact, side.
I had a very well-known contractor who's no longer with us one time told me, never build a flat roof.
Yeah.
You always want it to go at an angle, so I get it. If there's no other comments or questions.
If you're not as
Oh, yeah.
concerned as I am, was and no longer am concerned, you may want to combine initial and final design review based on this being a very small project and not having them come back because it sounded like you were going in that direction. They would like that, but certainly you're not obligated to it.
I would think
I'm okay with
that
that.
makes sense.
So I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to all staff comments for both initial and final.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have plats and plans, and we have one item to review today on that. It is the Nissan dealership site plan for 61,170 square foot motor vehicle sales automobile dealership building on 6.85 acres, zoned commercial highway located on Warrior Drive and New Salem Highway. MB Murfreesboro Nissan Real Estate LLC is the developer. Ms. Rush, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commission, and thank you, Ms. Green, for scrolling through the agenda, so I wouldn't have to go through 200 pages and find it where it is, so I do appreciate that. So this is the site plan for an automotive dealership, Nissan, that is already located in our community, and they will be relocating from their current site on Memorial Boulevard to this new property over on Warrior Drive. This property was recently subdivided. They are going to be locating on the rear property, the parcel that's closest to the highway. There is a private roadway that connects directly to Warrior. There is no direct connection off of New Salem Highway, so the entrance would be via that private driveway. The site plan is for approximately 61,000 square foot building. They would provide parking on site for employees and customers as well as their inventory. The conditions include no inventory storage can be within the drive aisles or on any of the landscape planters, so those would be things that would be subject to. They also have an unloading zone on the property, so it would provide for any of the deliveries of the vehicles themselves. The applicant has applied for and obtained approval of a special use permit from the Board of Zoning Appeals. That went to the Board of Zoning Appeals in June 2022, and that was required due to the zoning of this property of CH requires that they get a special use permit for sales of automotive vehicles. Staff is recommending approval of this site plan be made subject to all of staff comments. The applicant's engineer that represented them is here today, as well as a representative from Nissan, if you have any questions of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. What questions does everybody have on this site plan?
My only concern was being such a heavy traffic area. I wanted to confirm that the roll-up doors weren't facing New Salem or on Warrior, and that doesn't look like that's the case. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So there's no roll-up doors facing New Salem at all. The ones that are facing the highway are going to be screened with vegetation, as well as the ones that face Warrior will be screened, but there will also be commercial development buildings in front of that, so you would not have, that would not be visible.
Okay, thank you.
Staff felt that the project was in good order, and not really sure why we didn't have it on consent, other than Matthew wanted to make sure that you guys had a chance to look at it.
Yeah, it's a big project.
It is. I'll move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Ms. Rush. Next, we are moving on to new business. These items we will be scheduling for public hearings. First item is a zoning ordinance amendment regarding amendments to Chart 3 pertaining to parking space and aisle design requirements. The City of Murfreesboro Planning Department is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you very much. This first item of new business is coming to you at the request of planning staff. We have been working with and talking with various civil engineers for developments in our community, particularly for garages. During our discussions, we became aware that the Chart 3 that we have on our zoning ordinance, which gives you the aisle design requirements and the dimensions for parking spaces based on their angle, so 90 degree would be your traditional back out, and then there are angled spaces. We took a closer look at our numbers and thought there was an opportunity to study those and see if the chart might be ready for some updates. And so I'm going to hand out here 2 pages. The first is what's in our zoning ordinance today, and that's Chart 3. And then the second one that I hand out is our proposed amendments for Chart 3. Parking structures or structured parking are becoming more prevalent in Murfreesboro, certainly not as often as you see in big cities, but we do see a need for them. I was speaking with some civil engineers who were looking at a garage for St. Thomas Hospital, and that's kind of prompted the closer look at our numbers and our widths. And so to study the item, we looked at some peer communities. We actually took tours of various parking structures in Murfreesboro, in Nashville, and in Franklin to see what it looks like in the field. Certainly older structures have a different type design than what we see today. And then we acquired some of the national recommended studies based on our professional affiliations for what is recommended. We worked together on this to come up with the proposed changes, which I have bullet pointed, but Mr. Gabriel Moore, who you recall is an engineer in the planning department, took a lot of initiative to research and help us figure out the right numbers, and so he'd like to present to you the information and the methodology and thinking as why we're proposing to change the chart. We would like for you to schedule a public hearing for this item, and our recommendation is that you schedule that public hearing for the first Wednesday in August, and so I think we can be ready for that. We are sharing the information with folks to get their feedback, but at this time, Mr. Moore would like to present the information on this change, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
So can I ask one now?
Yeah.
So am I understanding you to say this is strictly for parking structures, nothing else, correct?
It's for both. This Chart 3 actually is dimensions for surface or structured parking. It's based on the angle of parking. It doesn't distinguish between the two. And so we think that, at first, we wanted to create some different standards for parking structures, but then we realized what we had was sufficient, and that we think just updating this to current standards would help surface parking and garage parking.
Okay.
Public garage parking, not not in your home. This isn't for your private garage.
Okay. Welcome, Mr. Moore.
Good afternoon. I'm the newest project engineer with Planning Department, and I think I was introduced several meetings ago, but my first opportunity to stand before you, and grateful for that. Grateful for the opportunity to work in Murfreesboro, my hometown. And but did want to, Margaret Ann's done a great job of, I should say Miss Green, please forgive me, my first, Miss Green's done a great job setting up kind of what we've looked into. I'll probably repeat a few of the things she said. This has kind of been driven by additional parking structures, parking garages that we're seeing more of in Murfreesboro, and we felt it was an opportunity to look at, does there need to be more guidelines or guidance in our documents specific to parking structures? And I will say that kind of in our research that we've done, there really is no need for a differentiation between parking structures and surface parking. So that was kind of the first thing we looked at. And as Ms. Green said, we visited, she's even got some photos here, which I don't know that I want to bring up necessarily.
Here we are.
Of our visit. You always look worse in photos than you do in person, at least you feel like you do. But anyway, we visited several structures in Nashville, Franklin, and Murfreesboro. Actually did some virtual visiting, if you will, via GIS and those type things. Took measurements. We've also looked at other local municipalities, and I believe some of that information is in the packet that we have submitted as well on the, I think it's on one of the last sheets, the parking dimension comparison sheet. So you can see some of the other communities we looked at. And what we found was also we did research peer-reviewed studies that had been done specifically from the National Parking Association. And what we found in all those things that we looked at, from what we have currently today in our ordinance, which Ms. Green passed out to you, is a little bit, I'll say conservative, on the conservative side of design when compared to national studies that have been done, as well as local communities and our neighboring communities. And specifically to that, I guess I would use the word, there's maybe a little bit of a penalization for angled parking in the city of Murfreesboro. And you can see that if you look at your the current chart 3, that was passed out, you can kind of see if you start at a 90-degree parking angle, your overall, what we'll call module width, is 60 feet. That requirement in column F there is 60 feet. And as you drop down a couple of angles, that module width increases, and then it starts to decrease. And almost all the areas we looked at, that is atypical, and it's kind of a penalization of angling your parking. So what we've done is a couple of things with the chart here. The proposed chart 3 is a simplification. There were some dimensions that were unnecessary on the other chart that we've removed, and we have also removed and this may make for good discussion. We've removed the 8.5 foot width, which would be a compact width. It's still there, it's just been removed from the chart and footnoted. That was on footnote 1, I believe, that a maximum 20%, which is in line with the ordinance today. It's just an extra footnote to this chart that wasn't there. And then we also noted as well, we took out some angles that we didn't feel were necessary due to some guidance in the standards, national standards, and again, just try to simplify the chart. And the main difference here is that the module width, which is column E on the proposed chart, you'll notice it reduces, that's the overall width, starts to reduce as the angled parking goes from 90 degrees down. So I think with that being said, I will say also that we're involving stakeholders with this as well. We want to get them involved and get their input on this this revision as well. But I'm here to answer any questions you may have or further clarifications. So thank you.
Okay, questions for Mr. Moore on either of those charts with this information?
I got one question for you. I guess bigger picture, what's the change? Are we adding angled parking to the ordinance, or are we switching out something?
It's a great question. Big picture is that we currently have angled standards, and if you look at the current chart, you can go down the column A there, and those are the angled parking that we allow, 20 degrees, 30, 45, and on, all the way up to 90. So we have taken a few out that we feel were unnecessary. One, I'll give you a specific example, the 80-degree parking that is listed on our current chart today is an angle that is not recommended because of you get a turning movement. It creates an environment to which a turning movement out of the parking space would go against the natural flow, because you've got that opportunity at a less severe angle. So that was one we took out because, again, that's just an element. That 75 to 90 was a range that there was no recommended that you not put an angle in at that. So we took some out. So we're not really. We have angle parking allowance today, and we will continue to have that parking allowance. The main difference is the module width from the edge of the parking stall on one side all the way to the edge of the parking stall on the other, that column E. That's the main difference. Whereas today, you see that number at 60 feet on column F for a 90-degree space. It's the same on the proposed chart, but for those, once you start going down to 75 degrees, 70 degrees, that total width starts closing in because of the angled parking. With that caveat of if you have a two-way drive aisle as well, you will always have to maintain the 22-foot minimum drive aisle if it's a two-way. One way, you can start reducing that. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Do we have something in place that determines, that angled parking is only used when there's, one-way traffic, I guess is what I'm trying to think about this. In the parking garage where I park all the time, I can park on either side when I go down through there. If it's angled, I can't. But, it seems, are we trying to allow for less property to be used here? Is that the point of having the less wide total space? So we can use less space and get just as much parking, but then does that require us to only have one-way traffic in the parking structure itself?
Another great question, and we have seen, the answer to your question is, I think, when one-way travel is utilized on a site, it will allow for that reduction of total space used, total space required for a parking lot. We've actually seen a garage come in that's been proposed that has one-way circulation around the exterior of the structure with a two-way circulation being down the middle ramps. So there are designs out there that will allow for one-way circulation where you can reduce that overall footprint. So
it's the only thing I think about Kroger's or whatever, they have the outside parking, but when they have the same angle, still people go the wrong way and back up into the space and all that kind of stuff. And it just seems like if we don't account for that and the space in between the parking spaces, that maybe we're asking for a little bit of trouble to allow people to push that width in too much, where clearly people are still going to do the same thing, except now you're forced to go out against traffic in an area where there's not 22 feet. Just saying.
Right.
That aisle is not reduced when they're, like in Kroger, where these are like this and this like this. It's still 22 feet. They don't get to reduce it if there's still two-way traffic in the middle. It's only if
Yeah, I guess even if there's, I don't even think there's supposed to be two-way traffic in between Kroger's.
Oh, they just
Thinking
do
more
it
like
Both- when they
Sam's
both like
Club.
This.
Sam's
Sam's
Club.
Club does that where it's, yeah.
Yeah, so like if both of the spaces are like this and you're supposed to be going this way.
Yeah.
You pull in there or you pull in there, right?
Right.
People still pull down this way.
At the head of it, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
and then they back in or they turn, funny
Sure.
and I don't know the right answer to it. I'm just kind of saying we want to be careful about how we structure when we allow this kind of thing. If it's natural that there's only one entrance, you can only go in that way and end up out that way and you can't come in that direction, I think it makes sense. I think if you come in from the top,
Right.
might as well skip it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. When you reduce the drive aisle, it does discourage people going the wrong way. If you have a really wide drive aisle with angled parking, there's no reason, you've got plenty of room to do what you want. I think that in some of the older areas, it's just, when there's not, the parking lot's not full, there's not a lot we can do about it. But in the new designs, I think that this will help discourage it however we can on paper.
Yeah, I guess I was just sort of asking if in this ordinance or anywhere, is there anywhere that kind of talks about when we would use this or when we wouldn't? Or if not, maybe I'm just suggesting down the road, you guys may want to consider it. That's it.
We use this chart for every site plan that comes in every month. We just don't mention it because it's a starting point for us when they first come in. I think staff uses this so frequently, but there's not really, because it's numbers and minimums, there's, start here, and then we never discuss it with you all because it's the starting point generally.
And to your point, we do currently, I totally understand, I may be guilty myself of going down one of those one ways the wrong way. But we do allow for that now in the current chart. We're just tweaking the numbers a little bit, so I think your point is maybe a bigger question, Commissioner, but we do allow for it now. We're just kind of tweaking those numbers, taking off 2 or 3 feet. And I think it certainly can be a discouragement as you do narrow those one-way aisles up and discourage drivers not to drive into them. Still happens, totally get it.
I just think you're in trouble if you make it too narrow, and because once you're inside a parking structure and there's any traffic, you're stuck. You can't just get out, you can't just turn around and go the other way, and if somebody's behind that person, I just would say the bigger picture that I'm getting at is you probably should be very careful about how we use the narrower piece, and just from a preference standpoint, I'm really glad that every day that I go park in that parking garage, I can park on that side or that side, no matter which way I come in or out, I can just go either direction. I know it takes up more space, but it's awfully nice.
A planning commission conversation that I recall when I was just a wee planner here 18 years ago was the planning commission talking about using tire flattening claws to keep people from going the wrong way. Do you remember the tire flattening claws?
I don't remember.
And it made an impression on my young planner brain, and the planning commission was not willing to start making surface parking use tire flattening claws. So in my head, every time I hear this, I was like, tire flattening claws.
For the record, I did not say that.
The record reflects that, sir.
Use intense.
I remember Rom describing that.
I'll move for approval if there's no more questions.
We want to move to set a public hearing for August 3rd.
Yeah.
We could do that.
That's it.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much, Mr. Moore. Appreciate it. Great job. Next item is a zoning application for approximately 89.2 acres located along Veterans Parkway, Blackman Road, and Lyle McDonald Court to be zoned GDO1 in addition to the existing CH and CF zoning. The City of Murfreesboro Administration Department is the applicant. Ms. Rush, welcome back.
Thank you. So, a little bit shorter than Gabe. The existing base zoning districts of this property will remain, and those are CH and CF, which is commercial highway and commercial fringe. The request is simply to put an overlay, the Gateway District Overlay -1 district, onto this property. And the purpose of that is to rezone, is to ensure future development of these properties will be subject to high-quality site and building design, and also to further regulate the uses that can be established here. This is an area that is growing quickly, and so that is one of the primary reasons the city is the applicant for this rezoning. Adjacent zoning to the north and northeast are Zone CH. Properties that are zoned to the southeast are PRD, which is Planned Development Residential, and further to the south is PUD and PCD. And then properties west of Veterans is, west of Veterans is Zone PUD. Also, West Lawn PUD is located on both sides of Veterans Parkway, which contains commercial uses and medical uses, as well as an apartment complex and single-family residential. Several of these also have a gateway district overlay, again, to ensure that the development is of a higher quality and design. Now, the future land use map that is currently adopted and in use shows this as a general commercial land use designation, and then the proposed one that staff's been working on shows this as EG, which is employment generating. In both cases, the Gateway Overlay District is consistent with those and does not conflict in any way with the land use designation. Staff is recommending approval of this request for the purposes that it is consistent with the land use designation maps. The Gateway GDO1 zoning is intended to ensure high-quality design and site planning for the property and will help regulate the uses that will be established. And the GDO1 zoning is consistent with existing zoning at this interchange and with other PUDs in the surrounding area, including West Lawn, which is also required to comply with the GDO design guidelines. Staff is asking that this item be scheduled for a public hearing, and we are requesting August 3rd, 2022 as the date.
So is the city the owner of this property?
That's my question.
Who owns the property?
We are not. Let's see, owner.
So, okay, I'll ask a follow-up question then. Did the owner request this, or?
The city's been in discussions with it. So the owner, one is Vanderbilt, and the other one is the Donald McDonald. And those property owners are acceptable to this proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Is it possible for them to tell us that it's acceptable or submit it to you in writing? I mean, if I'm the property owner, I'm reluctant, you know?
I can take that message back to administration
Okay.
and see if they can provide us something.
Okay, that would be
Public
great.
hearing, okay.
I'll make a motion for a public hearing on August the 8th.
The 3rd.
3rd of the 8th.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Okay, then we have a zoning application to remove the GDO4 zoning on approximately 31.6 acres located along Medical Center Parkway between Northwest Broad Street and Memorial Boulevard. The City of Murfreesboro Administration Department is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you. Our third item under new business is a request that was received by the Planning Department from the Administration Department. They submitted an application for the Planning Commission to consider removing the GDO4, Gateway Design Overlay District 4, from properties along Medical Center Parkway from Memorial Boulevard to Northwest Broad Street. And so you can see the areas that are proposed in yellow on the map on the screen. The GDO4 does extend across Broad Street following Medical Center Parkway, and this application is not for the west side of Northwest Broad Street. These properties are, this application is made by the City Administration Department and without the consultation of the property owners. It's made at the volition of the city. And I believe, as you know, the Gateway is an overlay district that creates a process that has high-quality design. This area is mostly developed, although not all developed. And redevelopment or modifications to existing commercial buildings are required to go through the gateway process and adhere to gateway standards. Many of these properties are single-family lots. They're basically the first wave of urban renewal after the Second World War, and so those are smaller lots, and those are in the Gateway Design Overlay District as well. The Gateway does exempt existing single-family residential from needing to do anything for the Gateway standards, but if there was any redevelopment, it would apply. In this area, you see there's Jackson Heights, there's Fat Guy's Barbecue, which technically is a gas station that does barbecue. There is a nail salon, Dollar General, portion of Boys and Girls Club, drainage area, and then there's a lot that used to, I think McCabe got site plans approved several times. I think it's the opinion of the administration department that the gateway isn't necessary here based on what's existing, so they've asked for Planning Commission to study removing that overlay district. Of course, I studied the impacts that this may have on the property, and so what I would want the Planning Commission to consider when considering the application for the administration department are the changes that would be permitted that are currently not allowed. One of the changes is that the Gateway Design Overlay District 4 restricts height to 35 feet. And when you remove that, the properties that are zoned commercial highway or heavy industrial or commercial fringe, then the base zone height would regulate. So for those uses, commercial fringe has a maximum height of 45 feet. Commercial highway and heavy industrial have a maximum height of 75 feet. So it does allow taller buildings. I think another element that staff would like Planning Commission to consider is the prohibition of uses on these lands. So the way that the city regulates uses in the city of Murfreesboro is we have a uses permitted chart. The Gateway Design Overlay District has some prohibited uses that's a little different. And so there's prohibited uses within all the gateway, and of course there's additional ones for the GDO 3. Some of the uses that are prohibited today, that if you removed it would no longer be prohibited, are carnivals, circuses, fireworks sales, Christmas tree sales, itinerant and temporary outdoor sales of merchandise. So we always called them Velvet Elvis in the past. So some of those Velvet Elvis folks that we saw here. The sale of souvenirs, mementos, vegetables, landscape materials, rugs, vacuums, food, beverage. There's a long list of that. Those are temporary uses of land. And then the third element is some of this property is zoned heavy industrial, which allows a wide range of uses. And so removing, not all the heavy industrial is in the gateway, a portion of it is, but removing the gateway overlay also removes a prohibition of some of those uses in the heavy industrial district. So you'll just want to consider that in your impact. That's also true with commercial uses. There are a list of commercial uses that are currently prohibited that would be permitted. Yes, sir?
Would you mind saying that again now? If we remove the GDO overlay, then it adds more uses back to the HI?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You have those specified?
Yes, I do.
Mic turned up.
I've got the uses permitted chart in here, but like on the screen, I have the uses that are prohibited currently. So you can see, adult uses are a lot of the first ones. Commercial outdoor amusements, indoor amusements, packaged beer, which is not beer consumed on premises in a restaurant, but like just a beer store, which we don't see as many of those anymore since the liquor laws changed and liquor stores sell beers. Tattoo parlor, sauna, wrap parlor is an adult business, pawn shops, some kennels, self-service laundry. There's a second page. It's got some of the other uses that are prohibited.
So,
You go ahead, yeah.
what's driving this application?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it's in an effort to, when people have the existing buildings, they want to make changes to the buildings to maybe make it a little easier for them, like Jackson Heights, some of the smaller businesses there, maybe they want to paint or do different things to their buildings. Currently, I'm saying, well, you need to meet GDO regulations. And I think maybe it's making it a little easier for them. I think...
Are there other, like is GDO 1 make it available to do that kind of stuff, but not necessarily change everything else? Or GDO, is there a GDO 5 or?
There's four. There's four.
So what happens when we take GDO 4 off?
There's a list of items that aren't allowed in any of the GDO, and that's what these are. My next item is for GDO 3, which is this list plus some. So anything with a Gateway Design Overlay District prohibits the uses that I have in front of you.
I think that when originally this GDO extended, when we took and renamed that little portion of Loki, is it Loki?
It was.
Loki, to become Medical Center Parkway, we were hoping to see the continuation of what we saw out on Medical Center Parkway come right on through all the way up to Memorial. So if that happened, we wanted to see it developed in the same way that those things were developed. And I think what has happened for this little area, with so many of the single-family homes, it's just a different area, that one little strip from Broad Street to Memorial. And so it's maybe just a little house that's redeveloping. It's not somebody buying 5 houses, which is what we had hoped, and redeveloping a whole property and building an office building and all of these things. It's just trying to redo a little something here and there. I just think that's the way it's kind of ended up. It didn't extend like we thought it was going to, and so we put that restriction on there when we changed that name to Medical Center Parkway. And all I would think what this is doing is going back to just the zoning it was before. It's just going back to base zoning like every place else in the city. So I would guess it's going to be whether we decide as a planning commission that we still want to see that property along that section of Medical Center Parkway hopefully develop into something bigger than the lots and things that are there now. Then maybe we want to leave the GDO 4 on there. But if we want to allow for some of the smaller developments that are not able to meet a GDO requirement, but yet they want to take a property and redevelop it, then we would be looking at removing that. That's kind of what I was...
I'll speak for, I'm kind of against this C and D. I want to leave the GDO on both of them, and it may not be for development for 30 years, but at least as we redevelop and as we do things and as people want to improve the properties, we can bring them up to that higher standard. If we're going backwards and we're going to start allowing all these other usages also, I don't think that's I think we're going backwards in that direction.
So just hold off and wait for that development to come.
Yeah.
I think that the challenge is timing. We're just now finishing off the Medical Center Parkway development, and now you're going to be forced to go down this way. If we give it a little bit more time, we might get there. But if we change it, we are not going to get there, because you're going to have a lot of people come in and try to redevelop these into city.
Yeah, it's whatever they can do.
And I guess for me, I think we should give it a little more time.
And you have to think, is this part of the gateway too? Is it part of the gateway? Do people use Medical Center Parkway to get to Memorial? Yeah. And you think about the Dollar General and the Salon Suites deal that's already had to pay the extra money. They've put the extra work into it.
And they look nice.
And they look nice, and all the properties that are owned back in behind there may say, we don't want our neighbor to be an adult cabaret that doesn't even have building standards up to the Dollar General. I think this is, I wish I knew more about some reasoning on this, but from my standpoint, I just can't see how this is even remotely a direction that I would want to go.
Yeah, I agree.
To start allowing adult cabarets.
I don't, love to hear the reason. I guess we've heard the reasons, but I wouldn't vote for this based upon the reasons. I think within time, even some of these RS, whatever it is, 10 lots, RS 10, that are sitting on Medical Center Parkway, somebody's going to go in there and try to buy 3 to 6 lots at a time where they can redevelop it commercial. I don't.
I would actually,
Yeah.
Hope and intention, yeah.
I would actually rather see give some of these RS10 lots some dual zonage and let them be commercial fringe or commercial highway on top of their RS10 usage, where if somebody right now owns one of those properties and they want to develop it commercial, let them run.
So I brought this up in the past, and both in city council and in staff level, just discussions, but part of what might help this situation, that I think that one of the things that you described, Ms. Jones, is that, I've always been a fan of the idea that if there's a current owner of a property and they're trying to make some improvement to their property, that even though there's this situation that says, okay, well, if you have a change or whatever, that now you got to come all the way up to this, this GDO4 level, that's hard for a small business to take on something like that when they're just, when they're trying to improve their landscape plan or their building face or whatever, that if it's the same owner that owns that building, to make an improvement, that we would allow them to, this is an oversimplified way, but, to go halfway, not to have to do the whole shebang to get there, but give them the capability to improve it, just not the, $97,000 version or the $243,000 version. I think we spend an extra $700,000 or $800,000, as I remember it, on Fire Station 4, that's in the next item here, just a couple of years ago, that now we're talking about, maybe not, we don't think it's important, but anyway, just that might be a solution to some of this too, is that we take on a policy, the Planning Commission and Council would take on a policy that would allow for improvements to be made within the GDO by the same landowner, for example.
By the same landowner, so if they sell it.
If they sell it, now maybe you got to bring it up, that's part of the transaction, right? Yeah. But if you're the same landowner and you're trying to make improvements, I think that might address the small business part, and then we don't have to erase all this.
Yeah. Madam Chair.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry I was late. I was in a meeting. Councilman LaLance, that's exactly what this lifting of the GDO in this particular area. We've had 2 smaller applicants for redevelopment in this area to struggle with the landscaping, bringing the landscaping islands up and the requirements for the GDO, and thought it would be better in this particular area to lift the GDO for those reasons. And looking at how we thought that the businesses would redevelop in this area and what would be infilled, thought that every time we did that we would run into those opportunities, and thought it would be much better to take this particular portion out of the GDO for those reasons.
You may have missed part of what we were talking about when you walked in, but the idea of allowing a whole bunch of HI uses by removing the GDO here is a 100% no-go for me for the next 40 days. I just tell you that, 100%. And then
the restrictions?
Lifting the uses.
Lifting uses.
By allowing the uses that would be allowed if we remove the GDO. But also, I just don't think we should remove it, period. What I'm suggesting is that we put a policy within the GDO saying that you're able to make adjustments not all the way up to the GDO4 standard if you're the same owner.
And I think there would have to be maybe some sort of time limit on that.
Yeah, that would probably make
Because I don't think, we have already some existing circumstances where I think if we were to think about that or talk about that, we're going to need to have some time limits on that.
I just be careful. I'll argue that when Medical Center Parkway was developed, if you didn't give it time, which is 20 years, then and say, well, you know what, we're going to give up on it because people aren't willing to redevelop or develop the property in the way that we want it developed based upon these guidelines, then this wouldn't have that what we have wouldn't have happened. I'd just be careful.
I agree. Yeah,
I mean, we're sitting here talking about it because it hasn't happened in 20 years. If the planning commission or city council didn't have the foresight, if they were taking the same action in a 10-year span on Medical Center Parkway, then I think that would have been very short-sighted.
But it has happened to some degree. I mean, there are a few things, like I said, the Dollar General, I mean,
Absolutely.
they're at least nice, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, to what has happened. And I got to tell you, the people who own the property behind those may very well be expecting
Yeah,
that this is what's going to be beside them.
I'd be very careful.
Yeah, I'm just, I don't know what we need to do as far as a motion here, but I mean, we're just trying to set up a public hearing at this point.
yeah, but do we,
I guess
Do we
we
need
could
to, I mean-
defer setting the public hearing even, or push it out, or Mr. McKnight?
No, just wanted to make sure we also know that, we still have our design guidelines, so we'll be able to regulate what's being built here as well. So it doesn't lift any of those requirements or guidelines. But we're open to what the direction of the commission as to the next steps.
Yeah, I think some of the uses that would be removed would be as much of a concern as just the design
I
guidelines.
think in that instance, we thought, the current zoning in those areas, RS-15, RS-8, we could do that with some restrictions left on the uses. But we're open for next steps from the commission.
look, I think instead of removing the GDO, I said it a minute ago, I'd rather dual zone all the RS on the top, on the north, and leave the GDO in place and let the plan come to fruition.
So basically, sounds like happy to set a public hearing for August 3rd, but you're probably not going to get a lot of favoritism on the vote from the planning commission.
Yeah, I would think that if that's the case, there wouldn't be a need to set a public hearing.
But I think the,
See what you come up with next time.
I think the question would be, is there a medium that we can help the small businesses that want to develop in here? It's not taking the zoning off from our perspective, but is there a way that we can do it? It's kind of like what Rick said, can we have policies? I think we're in agreement that we might need to do something, but taking it off and giving up on this becoming developed similar to the Medical Center Parkway development is also like saying, look across the street and you have the Jackson Hotel and saying, okay, well, what if they come to us and say, we want to take it off of ours too? I know we won't, but we got to give it time to develop.
Can we set the public hearing and let us continue to bring back some more information, but at least keep it moving?
I wonder if, I mean, I know this isn't something I've worked on, but I wonder if there's a way to address concerns with a text amendment as opposed to a map amendment. If you set the public hearing, it's my understanding it's on the zoning map, and I don't know if there's a time crunch for this, or if we can rewrite GDO4, I don't know, in a way that can satisfy everybody.
But again, I do want us to think about the fact that, as, there were some things that wanted to go out, on Thompson Lane, and they were not the type of things that ended up, that we wanted to see in our GDO, and so we suggested other places within the city. So, maybe there's other places for these small businesses. There might be just a better location than this. It isn't necessarily just that we need to change the zoning just to... believe me, almost every one of us up here, we're all for small business, so we want to help them all we can, but...
But what I'm saying, as far as small business goes, if you allow some dual uses there's a duplex on one of those lots facing Medical Center, there's several houses, let some of those houses be used as commercial, but they could be an office building, they could be a salon, they could be several different things in a house. So that, how much better would that help a small business on getting up and running? By letting them use them as commercial use?
Well, one of the problems.
But not require the GDO forward?
No, leave the GDO 4 in place. and
That's
do some kind of.
evidently the problem,
One of the
is,
problems with that is if you have a change of use, you got to come all
gotta
the
come
way
all
up
the
to
way
up.
the
Yeah,
GDO
yeah.
4 standard, which might mean you have to change the face, but that's kind of what I'm getting
Yeah.
at is, and of course, it'd be a change of ownership if you did that potentially, but I mean, look, we got to think through this a little bit. You guys obviously want this thing to get moved along, but I'm going to tell you, I can't imagine it's not a waste of time, and whether or not it's just better for us to try to come up with an alternate solution for whatever the core problem is behind this. Because, I mean, there's just a 0% chance I'm taking the GDO off and allowing those usages on HI all the way down that strip. And for the rest of it, just the GDO period. I mean, I just can't even imagine that I can come up with any reason that's good enough.
Sure. And certainly the view of the Planning Commission is very helpful. I think from staff standpoint, we have engaged the developers, designers, property owners up and down through here, and the public hearing gives them an opportunity to come and share that with you and not just staff's perspective. So I think there's a benefit for all of us to see and hear how our community views this, how our community views this. Public hearing's not a vote for or against it. It's really an opportunity for folks to provide their opinion on it. And I can tell you that staff, we have received comments and questions, and I don't want to use the word pressure because that sounds too strong, but at least something that they've asked us to bring to your attention and to consider, and so we're doing that. So let's not shut down debate today because you've got some heartburn with it, because you'll still have heartburn with it at the public hearing if you do, and that's fine. I think it would, let's let the process play out. Would be my recommendation to the body. I apologize for not being here to represent my own agenda item as the applicant. This has been a full schedule this morning already, so I'd be glad to answer any more questions from the Planning Commission, and I would encourage you maybe to go ahead and schedule it for public hearing. And all the points that are made today, our staff and me as the applicant, we've noted that.
Do you anticipate people coming to this public hearing to
Yes.
speak, landowners?
Yes. Yes, because they have landowners or business owners, developers, designers, the folks that have struggled with the vision that we tried to create along this corridor. And I think visually, as you drive through these different parts of Medical Center Parkway, starting at the interstate and make your way this way, when there's a point when you cross, and to me, when we get away from the median divided roadway and go to a traditional sort of urban arterial roadway, and we're into a lot of the properties that were existing use, that changes. The feel of it changes, the sense of it changes, and I think the development community and the business owners have told us they haven't invested significant dollars in flipping these properties into different uses. And so that's what we've encountered in working with applicants and trying to implement the vision of the GDO. We had a couple of new projects out there that were developed in what was called the Carpenter Village, but most everything else has been a rework or a redo. It hadn't been a scrape and replace necessarily. It's been trying to work around those existing structures and existing improvements.
So the argument that they'll be using is we would come in along this strip, however wide this strip is here, a couple hundred feet or something, I guess, north of Medical Center Parkway, and we would be doing stuff here. We would be redeveloping these things, these houses. We'd be doing things like that. We just don't want to bring it up to GDO standards.
Yeah, I think I'm going to look at Margaret Ann, see if she'll acknowledge this, but I think we've only had one of the residential homes that converted.
Yeah, I think the pressure is from the commercial industrial properties, not the single-family. There was one time where an artist studio wanted to go into a single-family home. Other than that, that conversation doesn't happen very often. It's the existing old buildings that are being repurposed or revamped that they're talking
So
about.
south, I mean, so does the color here, the yellow or green or whatever that is, does it end right where that ends?
This is, the color is the gateway overlay. So if it's south of that, like most of Jackson Heights is out of it, there's a little corner that's in it. And so you might remember, you looked at it when that little corner redeveloped, but most of it's out of it. There's Toots that's in it. There's a old, is that a oil change place? That's
Yes.
something else?
Liberty Station is,
There's a gas station here, Hardee's. There's an early project that's a multi-tenant there with a bank in it. These little tiny lots are zoned single-family mostly, except for this CP and this CF, which is like a dog business. But I think most of the conversations are to read the map, the HI, you can see it's all these properties here. These are commercial highway. These are commercial highway. And then this on the corner is commercial highway. I think most of the conversations, not the single-family homes.
Is
Yes.
that stuff that you just sort of circled down there? I'm sorry, it's not even in GDO?
If it's not yellow, it's not in the GDO. This is really just to capture what fronts on Medical Center.
yeah, it's only about a 250-foot zone. So those properties, the Boys and Girls Club, the developments in Carpenter Village that comply, Jackson Heights, they already have their zoning entitlement on the majority of their property. The land use restrictions that are in GDO 4 would only apply to that 200-foot portion or so adjacent to Medical Center Parkway. They still have an HI entitlement, and Mr. LaLance, a good point. I don't think we see that today as a viable heavy industrial property. It's the zoning that was with that property when it was there as Chromolux.
Well, would those business owners or landowners, would they be willing to change their zoning simultaneous with this? That would take away some of the uses.
It certainly would, and certainly whether they're willing to or staff at the direction of Planning Commission considers a rezoning application on those. As that the character of that area and maybe a broader discussion, and if I can editorialize just a minute, good staff, Planning Commission discussion about the vision that you guys have for this area. Very helpful to us to engage you and to hear your thoughts on that. But again, I'm going to look to Margaret Ann because she might be the most knowledgeable on it. How does this property show, how does this strip show in our versions of the future land use plan?
Of course, the gateway isn't really part of the future land use map, but we
The
recommend
underlying zoning, though.
changing it to commercial instead of industrial, because we don't think industrial is appropriate use there. I feel like I don't know what entitlements they would have if the city changes, and not by their own volition. I would want our legal to research if they have any entitlements to keep the uses that they were currently allowed. Our recommendation has been general commercial and suburban residential for the single family in the map that is on the screen there. Industrial is not our recommendation. But of course, we knew that the gateway was on the property.
Yes, and so the industrial is not a vision for that area on staff or Plan Commission's part, but it was an entitlement that was there. And the developments that are there and the developments have come through have worked with the existing industrial zoning, but they have developed commercially or office or in the sense of the Boys and Girls Club, that's more of an institutional type use there because it's not really, it's not really a commercial use. Yeah, I don't think there's any disagreement, Mr. LaLance, about the inappropriateness of the, of the HI zoning in our vision for this.
I think we have to be respectful a little bit. Liberty Station did not want to come to GDO. We made them come to GDO. I would assume that the Salon and the Dollar General didn't necessarily want to go to GDO to build their buildings. I think we got to be respectful for the people that we've already made do stuff like this. Thor's, did we make them take their mural down because they were in the GDO?
I'm sorry.
The Thor's, the guy that sells the woodworking and the trains and all that, he had a mural, and I thought the story from him was that he had to take his mural down because he was in the GDO at that point.
There's a mural on the end of Jackson Heights.
I believe that on the Thor's, the mural was on the front of the building, which was, and I believe still is, but certainly at that time was prohibited anywhere to have a mural on the front, where his was.
Didn't have anything to do with GDO.
I can't say for sure either way.
Yeah.
But I do remember it was on the front.
Murals in the GDO are issues of building appearance, which the zoning ordinance gives you guys the authority to have an opinion on that. So, the mural itself is not allowed or disallowed. It is a building appearance issue, and Margaret Ann, jump in there and push me on in the ditch or help me out however you can on that.
I'm tying my hitch around you. No, he's right. So colors are integral in the gateway, and so murals get a little difficult for us because if it's actually, it's a mural, it's in the sign ordinance. If it's not, it's an architectural treatment. And so if code says it's not a mural, then we look at it. But if it is a sign, it has to meet the sign ordinance, and the sign ordinance defines mural. Some of those you might call murals that don't meet the definition of mural in the sign ordinance.
Well, let me clarify. Thor's mural or whatever it was there since I was an itty-bitty little kid, and then from my knowledge, from what I was told by the owner of the building, was once it went GDO, he had to take it down. And it was there for 25 years. So at least the property owner himself thought he was having to take it down because he got a GDO overlay.
And I don't recall any specifics on that case. Mr. Ives may have some more detail. I would generally think that that would have been a lawfully established non-conforming use that could have continued. Mr. Ives, you want to push me in the ditch or pull me out?
It certainly could have been a lawfully established use. My recollection of, and I was somewhat involved with the request that he remove it, and my recollection is that it was because it was in the front of the building. Now, I've not been here as long as you have, Mr. Wright, so I don't know when that went on there. I had thought that it was a relatively recent addition, it was my understanding. But I really don't want to say any more than that without digging the file out and going through it, which I'll be happy to if that's appropriate, but my recollection beyond that is not that good.
But I think a valid point, Mr. Wright, that those existing uses and the overlay of the gateway design really offer us some challenges on how to navigate that, the appropriateness of the standards and continuing the uses or changing the uses. And when we do an overlay like this, the uses that were there before would generally be considered lawfully established non-conforming, and so they can continue. If, though, however, you have a triggering event, you want to change the use of your site, or you increase the degree of the non-conformity, you want to make it bigger or different, then all of a sudden you could have a triggering event that would qualify for us to say, yeah, that's not something that you can do under the current situation. And that's a lot of our challenges in dealing with the existing buildings and the existing businesses that were already in there. New construction was easy. The Dollar General and the hair salon, that's new construction. Yes, there was some additional cost there, but that's pretty easy. How to navigate an existing building and the types of uses those buildings were to what they want to become. Liberty Station being a good example. Going from a car repair that was probably a 1950s or 60s era building to the institutional and charitable use that she has in mind. I tell you, there was a lot of weeping and wailing and struggling with that as we dealt with it from a staff standpoint, and no doubt as you dealt with it from a planning commission. So the Gateway 4, to me, seems to offer us a higher bar to getting some quality reuse and redevelopment in there. And that, the thought was that we might see some more of that if the hurdle and the burden wasn't hardly as high. That the design guidelines and the other things that are part of our land use and development ordinances. And so that's why we brought it to you, just because of the conflicts that we were seeing and hearing about.
I don't want to make anybody mad, but what you just said could be of any area of the gateway. I mean, granted, a lot of it was just land and new construction was going to happen, but the challenges that anybody would have to deal with from a redevelopment standpoint in the gateway are what they are, and there's a purpose in that.
Yes. Again, a lot of valid points. I think the idea that Mr. Wright brought up, that one of the things that we say to people is that the gateway zoning helps protect the quality of the development in the area, and that is a true statement. You have some reliance on that, as to say, if I'm going to invest extra in my property, my neighbors will invest extra as well. And two, I think just with seeing things change here, we just sense that there is a challenge, Mr. Halliburton, with getting those upgrades, significant upgrades on those existing buildings and uses.
I want to ask a quick question too, because I think this will matter to how we proceed on this. Is, our next item here is to do something similar on out to the west. Which means we're not really only talking about this piece. We are with this item, but realistically, if we move forward with this, we're also talking about moving forward with removing GDO 3 on everything.
50 acres.
Yeah, how far does that go to the west?
Yeah, so different situation there. In that agenda item, we'd be glad to
Okay, so that's along
talk
the
about
river,
that an
not
hour
along the
later.
road.
Well, it's
Back on West
all
Water Street.
non-developable property.
Okay, so it's a different
Apples and
situation.
oranges.
Okay,
Yes.
so it's a different situation. Good. Yeah, I just
City-owned, non-developable.
that's why I wanted to ask, just to see if they did kind of connect if we're going out or.
We'll go back up. Can you go back to that aerial on that one?
This one or the other one?
The other one, the one further west.
Further west. Oh, yeah. The GDO 3?
Yeah, the GDO 3. Is that Bergman Brothers?
Floodplain, floodway, and closed lane field are the items in there.
Yeah, my staff comments were largely the same. There are additional uses that are restricted in addition to the ones that we talked about for the next item. The heights are a little bit different, so currently the GDO 3 bases height on what the use is. Office can be 150 feet, other commercial 75, and then the mixed-use district allows 75 feet for apartments and 150 for all other. And then the other thing I wanted to point out for the next property is the mixed-use district. When we created it in 2013, we specifically created it so that it would only be in overlay zones, and even in the description, we do say that the zoning ordinance says that it needs to be in the GDO or a compatible overlay district, and so I don't know if we'd want to consider changing the mixed-use zone to something else. I think on one hand, city owns the property, so maybe your risk isn't that high, but we're very clear when we created mixed use that we only wanted it in overlaid zones that had additional processes and standards. So it may be something that you want to consider, since it was a part of the mixed-use district description there in the zoning ordinance.
All right, I'm sorry to have interrupted. I just wanted to see if they were connected, and if so, how, so we kind of figure out this one, so we can.
Go back to the other one.
Yeah, sorry.
Which one do you want me to go to?
Okay, so we're on
C.
item C, the GDO 4 between Northwest Broad and Memorial Boulevard.
So I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we have the public hearing. I think it's good. I've got a certain idea in my mind, but I think it's always good to hear other opinions. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to change my mind. So I'll make a motion we have the public hearing the 3rd of August.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
3 opposed. And 4?
One.
Did you?
One. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. So we have,
Madam Chair, may I suggest we do a roll call vote, make sure who is voting?
absolutely. Do you need me to do that, Ms. Jaco, or you would like to do that? We've all got our name tags up and everything.
All those who want to make a motion to approve public hearing on August 3rd.
You're going to call the roll and ask for a vote.
All right?
Just for all in
Jamie
favor?
Engelwater,
No.
Ken Halliburton,
Yes.
Chair Jones,
Yes.
Chase Silas,
Yes.
Warren Russell,
Yes.
Sean Wright,
No.
Rick LaLance.
Nope.
Thank you.
Okay. So we will have a public hearing, or, yes, on August 3rd on that item. Okay. Next, we'll go through maybe hopefully a shortened version of that. Item D is a zoning application to remove the GDO 3 zoning on approximately 51.9 acres located along Medical Center Parkway, approximately 24.6 acres, and West College Street, approximately 27.3 acres. City of Murfreesboro Administration Department is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you very much. This next item is for you to consider an application submitted to you for your consideration of removing the GDO 3 from some properties. There are several properties, but it's portions of most of the properties that are identified in green on the map before you. You can see that some of those do run along the river, and then also adjacent to the city's fire station. There's also the city's landfill that's located along West College. That is a part of the property. Some of the properties are constrained with the landfill or with the floodway floodplain, so future development would be limited. I did want to mention that the major transportation plan that you adopted does show a future roadway improvement, short-term improvement from West Northfield across the river, railroad tracks. It shows it going through this property, but the alignment is not shown on this plan. It just gives an idea of the connection that we expect. So we do, in the future, expect West Northfield to connect the two ends. You can see one part's next to Vanderbilt Children's, and then the other, of course, is near Broad Street. So it is affected by the major transportation plan. And then I have shared with you the uses that are prohibited in the Gateway Design Overlay District. They are either temporary uses, itinerant uses, or permanent uses. There are lists that are prohibited in all the Gateway, and then there's even more uses prohibited in the GDO 3. The GDO 3, of course, is a little bit different because traditionally it's had some additional standards and review process that aren't the city's process, but the city has some role in. And so that, let's see what it is I would remember here. But the Murfreesboro Gateway Property Owners Association, Inc., utilizes the Development Review Committee, DRC, to meet the Gateway developers and review their plans for approval and disapproval. That DRC is part of the Tennessee Not-for-Profit Corporation, a mutual benefit membership corporation. And I don't know what any of that means, but it's what it said. And then those members give a recommendation prior to any projects coming to the city. The role that they would play on this property is unclear in the future, but I did want to mention it because I know that you're probably familiar with it. In addition to, of course, the use restrictions, there are height restrictions. I think that they'll be similar to the base zone, so I don't think they'll be very different there. I did give you a heads up just a moment ago that when the mixed-use district was created in 2013, the ordinance stated that mixed use is intended only for lands located within Gateway Design Overlay District or within overlay districts with a similar purpose and intent. I think you could argue CCO might be one of those overlay districts. So you may want to consider what impact removing the GDO would have on your management of these properties. If they are zone mixed use, that allows various types of uses, and it allows a component of multifamily, although I think that multifamily is not likely on these. That's the way our ordinance is set up. If you want me to go through any of the uses that are prohibited, I'll be glad to do that. Otherwise, the city's administration department is asking you to schedule a public hearing for this, and they're requesting August 3rd as their date.
Okay. What additional questions do we have that we haven't already discussed regarding this application?
So the comment, I don't mean to keep asking questions,
No,
but...
go ahead.
So the comment was, I just want to make sure I understood it, or if I dreamed it, that this is undevelopable property. Did I hear that statement?
Even the property on the north?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mr. Halliburton and members of the Planning Commission, property to the north is what we affectionately refer to as the old city landfill. It operated from 1968 to 1973 prior to the county opening a landfill on Jefferson Pike. So to bring that issue full circle for you, it's about 30 acres. It was used for 5 years, and coincidentally, we'll celebrate our 50th birthday of having closed that landfill and stopped using it, and we're still spending money on it. However, it does contain approximately 30 acres of trash that was disposed in that 68 to 73 time frame, and that waste varies from about 20 to 30 feet deep. We placed a clay cap over that and some other elements to help mitigate it as a closed landfill, and so we are currently under agreement with the state of Tennessee to continue to manage that under an order from the state, so it's long-term operation and maintenance, but we're managing it basically as a closed landfill. May have some utilities someday. Certainly landfills have been remediated and reclamated and built over and built through and all of those sorts of things, but in our current economy, we would not see this property as having a significant development value. In addition to that, we'll have to put, we have land use restrictions on it with the state of Tennessee saying how it will and will not be used, and so for us to do anything more than superficial things like trails and maybe overflow parking or something, we would really have to get their permission to do anything more with that. The other portions that were up for review, those are all...
Can I just ask real quick,
Yes.
though, on that portion, that northern portion?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, is there some type of landscaping either around that or
No.
bordering it or anything?
There's
or-
existing tree row that's along the Gateway Island and also the boundary with the property that we're under option on the fountains, and then and that's an old fence row, tree row that dates back to the prior to the city operating it as a landfill.
And if West Northfield is extended across the river, does it come through this property? Is that what you were...
Yes, our transportation planning study suggested there'd be a small impact, understanding that that's the parcel, not necessarily the limits of the waste, but point well taken, and point I'll make is, yeah, we'll have to manage the potential for impact on that, whether it's remove the waste and replace it with fill. If it's there where we need something, at some point we've got to be converting to a bridge. And so we don't have a design on that, so it's hard to imagine the impacts. What I will share with you is there's an existing 36-inch sanitary sewer force main that we ran through the state of Tennessee to get permission to install in this area, and so I can tell you that we can get permissions to impact it and modify it. We just have to deal with the consequences of that.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
You're asking good questions, bringing up good points. And then the properties along the West Fork of the Stones River, those are mostly properties that are in the floodway that we've designated for improvements for trail and other amenities there with the gateway. And so the standards didn't seem to apply, and while we were looking at making some changes in the gateway design overlay, and specifically as we looked at that area around the city-owned property, the Swanson property, and the Purdle properties, and Gateway Boulevard, and some others, this property just came to mind as something that the Gateway 3 didn't seem to have much application for. Because of the floodway, it doesn't have any sort of land development potential where we'd have new buildings or new offices on it, but it would be more along the lines of recreational and community amenities.
And the landscaping wouldn't, doesn't affect, does the change, to remove the GDO 3, does that change what landscaping would be required along the trailhead down through there? Or along the
It may very
trail
well, and so a good point, if and when, trailheads are designed or improved in there, they would not be subject to the Gateway standards, but would be subject to our traditional site plan standards as far as landscaping and improvements.
So you mentioned up there on that, like that upper part where the landfill, the old landfill is, that, we could put some things like sidewalks or something like that?
We have.
Without having...
Yeah, we put the Gateway Trail, the Overland Trail, I'm mixing and matching there's a trail around that, goes across the top of it, and also goes along the Gateway Island and Reception Center. That received the approval of the state of Tennessee as an allowable thing. It's really on top. It's sitting right on top of the clay cap and the clay improvements, and so there was no loss in the ability to manage that closed landfill.
You said overflow parking. Would that be like something that we could use for the Notes Live thing? If we could put a parking lot in up there by doing this?
Yeah, probably not so much for them, but something that the Parks and Rec has asked on several occasions for us to look at out there is the potential for some event parking that might be related to large activities at the Gateway Island Reception Center. We saw the impacts of parking and how we managed it for the fireworks show, but certainly Notes Live, the fountains, other activities in there, and I think I shared with the mayor and council, I think it was on Friday, the undeveloped parcels in this area, and there are about 100 acres of undeveloped land out here, not counting these, that are in the Medical Center Parkway, what we originally referred to as the Gateway, and I think I also shared with the mayor and council the sort of the development potential of additional 1 million square feet of improvements. I don't know, maybe it was, and I'm looking at Mr. LaLance if he remembers these numbers, but 4,000 to 5,000 new parking spaces and, potentially several thousand new occupants, whatever they might look like, whether they're customers or employees.
So just to be clear on this landfill piece,
Yes.
for me, it's undevelopable, or it's undevelopable as it is?
It is undevelopable. It's generally undevelopable as a commercial real estate in that, I don't see, or has limited development potential. I wouldn't say it's undevelopable because I know they've done it in other communities.
You could develop it, but you'd have to go reclaim, basically get all the trash out of it and fill it back up.
Or build go back to our Sunday school lessons and build on the rock instead of on the waste, maybe, so you got I know in some projects I'm familiar with, in some other areas where they have built through waste and protected, from landfill-based gases to make it up into the building spaces, and dealt with utilities and differential settlement and all those things. So it can be done. I just don't think the economy is there to do it today with 100 acres. Now, 20 years from now, when who knows what happens, and real estate in downtown New York's $1 million a square foot, and in the Gateway it's $1,000 a square foot. Will this come into play? It has potential then, but the economics don't work today. And this is still a city-owned property. It still has those land use restrictions on it, and so any effort for us to consider it for land development would have to come back through the mayor and council first to say, yeah, we're going to be okay with that, and then we would have to determine if the land use entitlement and zoning entitlements were appropriate at that time.
It just wouldn't have GDO on it.
It just wouldn't have GDO on it, but it could. It could at that time.
this council could say we want the same requirements that's around it.
Yeah, whether it's a city building or, we sell it or use it, yeah. I mean, it's still real estate we control. And so.
Oh, yeah.
Right, we got all of this is city-owned in this request.
Gotcha.
And at the end of the day, as we say, the best way to control real estate is to own it, and here, the second best way is to zone it. I just made that up, Mr. Ives, I don't know.
Don't ever say that again.
Well, I'm certainly not against the public hearing. This one confuses me even more as to why we would even go to the trouble to remove the GDO, but
Yeah, and
I'm sure I'm just missing something.
And my honest answer is that for those slight improvements that we are considering, overflow parking or perhaps a trailhead, just keeping those in our standard site plan consideration and not having them upgraded to a gateway design overlay standard. As far as landscaping, irrigation, and those sorts of things, and they're going to be minor improvements, but really that was my intention as the applicant.
Okay.
Since I did such a good job on the last motion, I'll make a motion for a public hearing on August 3rd.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. And opposed?
No.
And did everybody vote exactly the same on this one that they did on the last one? Okay, there you go.
That was
Got it?
efficient, Chair Jones. Very efficient.
Okay. So next, one more item here for our public hearing section. We have a street renaming to rename Winterberry Street, north of Palawinia Circle, to Mason David Drive. The City of Murfreesboro Planning Department is the applicant.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Aguilera.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chair Jones and members of the Planning Commission. This item is going to be an application to consider a street renaming for Winterberry Street. Hopefully this will be less contentious. If not, I can leave right now. Located in the Cherrywood Estates subdivision, it is located north of Polonia Circle. I'm just going to use the map that Margaret Ann brought up instead rather than trying to go down to it. It's approximately 120 feet long and stubbed to the undeveloped tract to the north. And as you can see on the map, that is actually where the proposed Mason Brook subdivision, we recently brought that to you all for consideration for a preliminary plat. And so during that discussion, that's when staff realized the situation that we have here today. And so Winterberry Street was previously platted with the Cherrywood Estates subdivision back in 2001. However, at that time, it went unnoticed, and the name was duplicated from a similar roadway, Winterberry Drive, which is in the Northwoods subdivision. Again, with the work that we were doing for the proposed Mason Brook subdivision, staff agreed that this was a good time to look at this. Our language in our regulations for streets and our subdivisions is that the proposed name for a subdivision, for a street in a subdivision, is that we don't allow for the duplication or closely approximate phonetically the name of any other street which may be located in another subdivision. The reason we have that is just because, of course, for motorists and emergency provider services, emergency service providers, that we want to make sure that they're going to find their address right. They're not going to be duplicating the streets and cause that kind of confusion. We go through that process regularly with E911 approvals to make sure that this is something that is not duplicated with any other subdivisions. So staff agreed that with the proposed Mason Brook subdivision and the proposed extension of Winterberry Street into that subdivision, that this would again be the ideal time to remedy this issue. And if you can go to the, if you can see right there, sorry, the regular map, if you can see that the developer has nominated Mason David Drive to be the updated name. And so we're going with this particular location and not Winterberry Drive because staff agrees that there are actually, this would be minimal, this would be a minimal impact compared to Winterberry Drive, which approximately has 35 homes addressed on it. Paulina Circle has only have, those two lots right there are addressed off Paulinia Circle and not Winterberry Street. So this would, again, help provide minimal impact and minimal disruption for the homes in that area. And we believe that this was, again, a much more wiser decision. And so per Section 5.2 of the subdivision regulations, the Planning Commission does have the final authority over street naming. So staff is recommending that the Planning Commission schedule a public hearing date of August 3rd, 2022, so you all can discuss this matter all further. I'm here for any questions.
Any discussion? We're ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we set a public hearing for August 3rd.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Much easier. Thank you, Mr. Aguilera. All right. We have staff reports and other business.
Not for me.
Nothing here.
What? Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you all.